So we're diving into some research today, and honestly, it's a bit of a tough one. We're talking about male victims of domestic violence, something you just don't hear enough about.
Yeah, it's almost like, what is it called? That spiral of silence. The less we talk about something.
The more it gets swept under the rug.
Exactly. And it just keeps feeding itself.
Like if you think you're the only one, you're much less likely to speak up.
It takes a lot of courage to be that lone voice.
And this research really shows how much traditional masculinity plays into that silence when it comes to male victims.
It's those expectations, Be strong, be stoic, be the tough guy.
Don't complain, don't whine.
Exactly. And seeking help, well, it can feel like going against that.
Like it somehow makes you less of a man.
Right. And we're not even just talking about seeking help for the violence itself. Think about the mental and emotional toll. Imagine, feeling unable to even talk about what you're going through because it goes against everything you've been raised to believe.
That's got to be incredibly isolating.
Absolutely. And this is where those societal norms, they have real consequences. It's not just some abstract concept.
Right, this impacts lives in a very real way.
One of the biggest things is how this silence, it warps our data on domestic violence. Because if men don't feel like they can come forward, our data is only capturing a fraction of the problem.
So then it looks like domestic violence is mostly a women's issue, which we know isn't the whole story.
Exactly. And when you're working with skewed data, the policies and resources you create, they're always going to be playing catch up.
It's like trying to solve a problem with only half the pieces of the puzzle.
And one of the things the research highlighted was how this affects things like shelter space. A lot of shelters are designed with women in mind, which, makes sense. But where does that leave male victims? It really shows how much we need accurate, inclusive data to find effective solutions.
And it's interesting how this all plays out online. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right?
Totally. Like, on the one hand, the anonymity of the internet, it can be huge for men who feel like they can't speak up offline.
They can find support groups, forums, all of that.
Right. There are even these whole social media campaigns.
Oh yeah, you see those hashtags and stories going viral all the time, raising awareness.
It can be really powerful for someone struggling with those traditional masculinity norms, to see other men sharing their experiences. It helps them realize they're not alone.
Exactly. It's like, hey, this isn't just me, which is a huge deal when you're dealing with all that shame and isolation.
For sure. But, and this is the tricky part, you can't just focus on the positives of the internet.
Because, let's face it, it's not all sunshine and roses online.
Exactly. There are downsides too. For starters, there's the whole digital divide thing.
Not everyone has equal access to technology.
And even if they do, they might not feel comfortable in online spaces. So while the internet can be a source of support, it can also exclude the people who need it most.
And then there's the privacy issue.
Oh, right.
Putting your story out there, even anonymously, it comes with risks.
Especially for someone already worried about how they're going to be perceived.
Yeah, and we can't forget about online harassment either. The internet can be brutal.
For someone in a vulnerable position, that can be incredibly damaging. It might even make them less likely to seek help in the future.
So how do we balance this? How do we use those opportunities online to break the silence, but also address those very real risks?
That's the million-dollar question. We need to be tackling this on multiple levels.
Like what? Give me some concrete steps.
Well, for one, we need a cultural shift. We have to start challenging those traditional masculinity norms that make men afraid to show vulnerability.
It's about changing the whole narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that when men acknowledge their experiences and ask for help, it's not seen as weak or unmanly.
That's huge.
It's a massive undertaking, but it's the foundation for everything else. And along with that, we need gender-neutral policies and support systems. Laws, resources, interventions, they all need to be inclusive.
So we stop thinking of domestic violence as just a women's issue.
Exactly. It's about creating a system that recognizes everyone's experiences.
And that includes making sure men have access to support that's tailored to their needs.
Absolutely. Support groups, counseling, even shelters. It all needs to be available and designed with their unique challenges in mind.
And we can't forget about how the media portrays male victims. Movies, TV, even just casual conversations, they all shape our understanding of this issue.
Right. We need to move away from those sensationalized stories and show more nuanced, authentic portrayals.
So their strength, their vulnerability, the whole journey.
Exactly. Because when people see themselves reflected in those stories, it's incredibly powerful. It tells them that their experiences are valid, their pain is real, and they deserve support.
Okay, so we've got cultural change, gender-neutral policies, specialized support, and responsible media representation. That's a long list.
It is, but it's important work. And it starts with each of us challenging our own biases, educating ourselves, and speaking up for those who've been silenced for too long.
And you mentioned earlier that research about men facing disbelief when they do speak up.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
We need to create an environment where that doesn't happen, where men feel believed and supported when they come forward.
100%. We need to build a world where everyone, no matter their gender, feels safe seeking help.
Because at the end of the day, domestic violence affects everyone.
It does.
And we all have a role to play in ending it. It's like they say, the first step is admitting there's a problem, right?
And part of that is being willing to talk about it, even when it's uncomfortable. The more we have these conversations, the more we chip away at those outdated ideas about masculinity and what it means to seek help.
It's about creating a society where everyone feels safe coming forward no matter what.
Exactly.
Well, this has certainly given us a lot to think about. We talked about the spiral of silence, those societal pressures, even the good and bad of the online world. It's a complex issue, that's for sure.
Definitely not a simple fix. But, just having this conversation, shining a light on this part of the domestic violence issue that often gets overlooked, that's a step in the right direction.
I agree. And for anyone listening who might be going through something similar, please know that you are not alone. There are resources out there, people who want to help, and things are changing for the better. It takes a lot of strength to reach out, but you deserve that support.
And remember, asking for help, it doesn't make you weak. In fact, it takes a lot of courage to speak up when you're hurting, to challenge those expectations, and to put yourself out there like that.